Yes, it's actually happening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you tuned in. I'm Jay Bassell and he is Terry Combs. He is also the DTG expert. Terry, how are you?
I'm great, Jay. And it's morning here out here in the great Southwest. So good morning.
We are enjoying some amazing weather, but more important than the weather is the fact that we've got a ton of people tuning in. This is another great session for Ask the DTG Expert. And I'm excited because this is a topic that comes up a lot. And I'm excited because I'm going to tease you with something that Roy and I have been working on. When I say Roy and I mean mostly Roy. Roy has been doing a lot of research and testing all of the pre-treats he could get his hand on. So in about
Super.
2 weeks, in about 2 weeks from today, we're going to have a pretty in-depth dive on all of the pre-treats, pros, cons. We're not trying to throw anybody under the bus. We're just saying this was our experience. So stay tuned for that, kids, folks, peeps, my printing freaks, all of you. We're glad you're here today. Excited for that session. But today, Terry, come on. What about this DTG box? What's going on with this thing?
Indeed. Jay, it's something that people are a little confused about, and we're not referring to that slight press mark that you get around the edge of the heat press.
Right.
I mean, that's the same mark that you're going to get if you're doing heat transfers in your shop, if you're doing HTV.
Uh-oh, Mr. Combs, this hasn't happened in a long time. Terry has temporarily having an internet issue. I really hope he comes back soon.
Heat transfer vinyl.
There he is.
If you're doing even the new DTF transfer.
Terry, you froze for just a second,
wow.
Right when you were saying HTV. So
okay,
hasn't happened in a while. Who knows? It's the luck of the draw. It's okay. This is live. This is real, folks. But you were just saying about it's not the usual heat transfer vinyl box you see, right? That's what you were saying.
Right. You see that edge. You see that edge anytime you press something. So if you're doing DTF transfers in your shop, if you're doing anything that's heat applied, you're gonna see a little iron edge. That's really not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is that stiff area around an image where you touch it and think it feels kind of like paper. It feels
yes,
as if you've starched just this area of the shirt. That's really what we're referring to, because, and then I think people get a little kind of hypersensitive to it and start saying, well, any edge they see, that's the DTG box. But that's not really the case. I mean, we've been using heat presses to apply graphics to shirts for many years. Anybody from the 70s knows that every street corner had a shop where you could go in and say, I want that transfer and I want it on this shirt, this baseball shirt, right? So that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about that stiff area around the shirt, and sometimes, Jay, even a little slight discoloration from it because of the pre-treat kind of showing on the shirt.
Yeah, and there are a lot of variables here, and we may not touch on every single one, but we are definitely going to try to cover as many as we can today.
Right.
As I said, also this is maybe a preview or a teaser for when we do take a deep dive in about 2 weeks. But I love that you explained that it wasn't that normal edge that you're going to see. We're talking about and I've got some examples to share here in just a minute.
Great.
But that slight discoloration, if you don't mind, Terry, because I want to share an example of what we're definitely not talking about. Okay. And this was shared with us on our F2100 DTG and DTF users group on Facebook, which you're all invited to join. You should all already be there. So let me share that now. And this was this was probably from about a month ago, and I think it could have been the genesis of this exact session. So at the top of this, Terry, you can see that massive discoloration, and at the bottom is the same print where they figured out what they were doing, and there's no problem. We're not talking about that. That looks like, I don't know, that looks like a scorch almost to me, but
yeah, certainly it's something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, it's a severe example of what could happen. And this is when I say we've got variables, this is what I mean. There are certain fabrics from certain brands that are more sensitive to some pre-treats, but not all pre-treats. And so this is kind of that, if you see this, it's most likely either something scorched, the temperature was off, or the wrong kind of pre-treat on the wrong kind of shirt. And so,
or let me add, Jay, UV light on a light color shirt with pre-treat, UV light being sunshine. If you have a white shirt that's pre-treated and you go right out into the sun and play a softball game, you may see some discoloration from the UV light, but generally you only see that on white or pastel garments, and certainly solutions to that as well.
Yeah, great point. Appreciate that. So as we continue to roll, here's what we really are talking about. So if that was let's set this aside for a minute. We want to make sure that we're talking about the correct information. When we say DTG box, we're really not talking about those severe cases. What we're talking about is this one. This is a better representation. If you look around the edge, you can see the print rectangle. What is it, Star Wars? I'm not a Star Wars guy, but I'm pretty sure those are all Star Wars stormtroopers.
Yes.
But the rectangle around that, where you can actually see a slight difference in color, a little lighter shade of black, and then an edge to it. So this is the DTG box that most people are talking about, right, Terry?
That's exactly right. And the discoloration is hopefully would wash away, but it's just too much pre-treat on the shirt. And the pre-treat is it's some binders and chemicals, but and I know we're going to be doing a pre-treat show here in a couple of weeks.
It's not just Elmer's glue that we're spraying down.
Yeah, here's the secret ingredient of pre-treat, and a lot of people don't realize this, but the secret ingredient covers 3/5 of the Earth's surface. It's salt water. And so if you apply too much, then you have a layer of dried salt on that shirt. If there's so much that it makes that shirt stiff, it can also discolor a little bit. That's just you're seeing the actual physical salt on the fabric.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. And I've got a couple of more examples to share. That was one, again, from our users group. But here's something, Terry, that you probably have not yet seen. But what we did this morning is we did a couple of prints. Well, we did these two actually yesterday. This is just in my office. Quick picture on the chair here. The picture on the left, it's just barely visible. It's a Cotton Heritage shirt. We used the correct amount of Epsom pre-treat, correctly, the correct amount, and prepared the correct way. And I've got two more examples to share with you, but I think this helps set the stage for those that are like trying to find that sweet spot. Is that a fair thing? Like why some people are using too much maybe is one of the questions I hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, and and we hear this all the time, and people are very free with information on the internet, and free information is, it's worth what you what you paid for it a lot of times. Hey, lots of good information, and sure. Some people just trying to help, but people saying, well, I need a more vibrant print, so I heard on the internet by using more pre-treat that's going to help. If you're not using enough pre-treat, that is correct. But Jay, most people, and by most people, I would guess 80% of people who do DTG printing use way too much pre-treat. If this much is good, then this much more has to be better, right? So that's one thing that people really need to do is experiment with less and less pre-treat, and find that spot where you get that perfect print, but you don't have evidence of the pre-treat on the shirt. So more is not better.
You said it before I could. More is, in this case, not better. And we are I hope we're not frustrating some folks with the exact, answer, because it's going to require some training and it's going to require some experimentation.
Right.
We've talked about this in the past, Terry, that in all settings of all kinds of productions, you kind of have to find your boundaries, if that makes sense. And so
exactly,
clearly we're trying to give some indication of what those boundaries should look like. But your printer, your heat press, your office, your humidity, there's variables there that are just going to be something to contend with. So,
right.
I don't want people to be frustrated that we're not saying here's the perfect formula, but we do have, right. Let me just jump to it. What's the common cure? Like if we do see, even on a normal print, just a slight edge How am I going to get rid of that, or what should I do, or what can I do?
Well, Jay, the simple solution is, reduce the amount of pressure on your heat press. That's going to help. The other thing the simple thing to do, and people do this in their shops all the time, is just buy a steamer and just steam around the edge. And that's going to take away that press edge. But again, this is not unique to direct to garment. It's anybody's out there doing transfers, anybody out there doing direct to film, anybody out there doing cut vinyl. It's the same situation. You just back off on that pressure, and if that little press line bothers you, just hit it with a steamer, and you get that'll take care of it for you.
And that steamer is going to help release some of the starchy feel too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's going to almost be like a wash, and as long as you don't have an extreme amount of pre-treat on your shirt, all the pre-treat washes out in the first wash anyway. Now, there are folks who wash their shirts before they give them to the customers. Most people don't, and I think most customers don't necessarily want a shirt that's been laundered. It doesn't have that crisp new feel to it, but your customer certainly will. That any residue of pre-treat is going to wash out in the first wash.
Love that. That's important information to know. I do know that we have some customers that will have a little, not a hang tag, but a little like a little note, some information to explain that, so that
right.
Sometimes the customer understands, but the customer sharing that with their employees or sharing that with others, like the customer's audience, who might see that as a mistake. So it's important. And we'll talk about this in a minute in the expectations. And it's funny that people are already asking about conveyor dryer, because that's one of the things that we're also going to talk about. So great point, Tim. Thanks for asking. But I just want to set the stage here, just to be clear, Terry, we're pretty much going to see, under normal circumstances, doing everything correctly, we will see a small rectangle, or wherever the pre-treat was on that shirt, you're going to see some of it after a production run, right? There will be some.
Well, you don't necessarily have to see pre-treat on the shirt, but you're going to see that edge, whether that shirt is pre-treated or not. You're going to see a little bit of an edge of that heat press, just like if you ironed one sleeve on your shirt and didn't iron the other sleeve, you're going to see that the press on the one sleeve. So, but by using a proper amount of pre-treat, you shouldn't really see a residue of pre-treat on the shirt.
So perfect segue for my next. You talked about you shouldn't see a residue. So I want to show folks what that's going to look like.
Okay.
We purposely made an example. This is not it. This is what we would say is in the range of normal. There is a very, very subtle, you can see it. And I zoomed in here on the right side. You can see my mouse, can't you, Terry?
Yes.
See that edge difference right there. So that's a little residue left over from the pre-treat, and it is going to absolutely wash out on the first wash. Correct, Terry? Just want to make
sure. Correct.
Okay.
And again, Jay, if you steam along that edge, that's going to feather it out so that it's much less apparent.
Much less apparent, basically not visible, and it anyone who sees it would be almost looking for a problem. If now, I know our audience doesn't have any customers like that, but occasionally I used to have customers that were a little on the, what should we say, particular side. Is that fair to say, Terry?
Yes. And I think too, Jay, that, people see a DTG print with far too much pre-treat, and then again, they are looking for any evidence then of that on other garments.
So we've got another example. It's again, keeping in the vein and the lane of discoloration maybe, or residue left over. And this is a more obvious example. This was not an Epson pre-treat. Just want to make that clear. Still the same shirt, still the same times and temps, same graphic, same Cotton Heritage substrate, but you can see a significantly, almost a discoloration. We're starting to see, forgive me for the reference, but the only thing I could think of is it almost looks like someone was wearing it and like sweated the shirt out. And it was all that residue after the fact, like it's like we were at gym class or something. I know it's kind of gross, sorry, but that after, like, it looks a little mottled. It's inconsistent even. So this is an example of knowing which pre-treats play well on which substrates. And we're going to dive into that in 2 weeks and get a lot more specific, but we just wanted to share an example of what to look for. This would be probably too much. And you would say, what did I do wrong? In this case, you may have experienced where some pre-treats on some dart garments leave extra residue. It's extra visible. So the good news is, the good news is that's not the case with the Epson pre-treat, just to be clear.
Right. Exactly right. And if it's a pre-treat that you have to mix, follow the directions carefully. Make sure if it's if it's a pre-treat that comes as a concentrate, you really shake it up before you mix it down, because if you don't, you're going to have different amounts of actual physical pre-treat depending on what part of the container you use. A couple of people, Jay, have asked, by the way, what's the proper amount? And Nick there in capital letters, proper amount. Let me just say this, and of course it's going to be experimenting in your shop, but almost like a mist of pre-treat on the shirt. If there's pre-treat dripping off that shirt, and if you use a method like a paint roller or devices that just lay down a lot of pre-treat as a Band-Aid. And what am I referring to? A pre-treat machine possibly that doesn't pre-treat evenly. So just add more pre-treat so that it gets everywhere. So again, you don't want the pre-treat dripping off the shirt. It's more like a mist of pre-treat on there. And yes, it's going to take some experimenting. I'm fairly certain if you already own a direct-to-garment printer, you have some rag shirts in a box right over there in the corner.
What? Nobody makes mistakes in this business. What are you talking about?
Let's do a little bit of testing with different amounts of pre-treat, and mark on there with a Sharpie what you've done, and not only look at the finished print, but throw it in the washer and see how it washes as well.
So I love that proper amount. That's tough. That's a tough one to nail down. That's what I was referring to when people were going to say, you weren't specific enough. Well, let's be fair to our audience. First of all, we are the makers and manufacturers of the Speed Treater TX. So we have an automatic speed treater, and it has a dial. And you will hear us refer to quite often, if you've gone through our training or if you are one of our customers, Roy and Tim and Joey and others, they will say that there's very little room on that dial, that they're somewhere between maybe a 4.5 to a 5.5, maybe a little bit more, but they're going to experiment depending on the garment. So for example, if it were a sweatshirt or a crew neck pullover, they're probably going to need more. Is that right, Terry?
Exactly right. And Jay, we often, you've mentioned Cotton Heritage a couple of times, the perfect substrate to print on for DTG, because it's a ring spun cotton, which means it uses thinner threads. It's woven more tightly, so you have a perfectly smooth surface. But sometimes you want to print on that Gildan Ultra Cotton, or maybe you don't want to, but you have to. That shirt is much more porous. If under a microscope, the weave is very loose, which means that the image can get lost down in the nooks and crannies of that shirt. So what's the solution online? And I'm kind of a proponent of this, is to double pre-treat it, dry it, and then pre-treat it and dry it again. That's going to help you to get that very vibrant print on a less than perfect DTG garment. But here's the trick. You don't, let's say your dial on your pre-treat machine is 5. That's the center point. Well, you don't do 5 twice. You back it off to 3.5 or 4, pre-treat it, dry it, and then do that same thing again. So you don't want to do double the amount of pre-treat. What you're doing by doing that first pass is giving the second pass of pre-treat a base to sit on to help you get that better print. Because, again, in the perfect world, we're using, one of the garments that has been specifically manufactured for the purpose of DTG printing. But we're always not in the perfect world. Sometimes there's that product that just isn't available as a ring spun cotton shirt. So you have to know how to go in there and kind of tweak the pre-treat a little bit. But again, the double pass is not double pre-treat. It's just 2 times through the pre-treat machine.
And we have
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were segueing again. Perfect timing. It's almost as if we've got notes over here and we know what we're doing. But the truth is that has happened where we have many customers who thought what we were saying was you need to hit this twice with 2 levels of pre-treat. So this example that I just forwarded to, same image, same settings, same shirt. This is a Cotton Heritage. We went ahead and left it at 5 and double pre-treated the shirt. And it was a significant difference in the feel. I mean, it was like almost started to feel like there was paper on it, like it was a transfer.
Mm-hmm.
It was way, way too much pre-treatment. Now, surprisingly, the print came out pretty good. There were a few spots on there where we were a little suspect. But if you handed this to someone, they would feel it and they would know, well, they would be questioning like, what's going on with this shirt? Like it's overstarched is kind of that feel that you've described before. So yes, it would still wash out and probably you would not have ruined the shirt, but it gets into this gray area of expectations when you deliver. And maybe you could speak to that just a little bit, like before we get into conveyor belts, like what's a good way to set that expectation?
Well, I think that a lot of customers don't know anything about DTG, never heard of DTG, so they don't have an expectation. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying to a customer, and now we cure this ink for washability, so we have to heat set it at about 340 degrees. So we use a heat press for that, so it will have a slight iron effect around the outside edge. Everybody out there probably on the planet has a shirt that they bought that was cured with a heat press. And, especially if you're buying from, say, an Amazon or someplace like that,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the garments you get, they use transfers, and maybe they're plastisol transfers, or maybe there's some other type of transfer, but they're heat applied. And I've certainly gotten shirts from Amazon. Yes, I buy retail price t-shirts,
What?
Jay.
That's like against our manifesto, Terry.
I could print that. But sometimes they come in and, they just have a nice feel to them. Sometimes you will see the outline of the heat press. Now, for me, it doesn't faze me at all because I know I'm going to throw it in the washer and that's going to go away. But there's nothing wrong with saying to the customer, for washability, because it's a positive. For washability, we do cure these shirts with a heat press, so you might see a little iron effect around when you initially get the shirt. So
on that first delivery, but after that,
correct.
Good to go. Okay, I love that, and maybe if anyone else had a better way of setting that expectation, feel free to share that in the chat. Someone did ask how much pre-treat did we put on those demo shirts. So the first shirt was our normal setting on a Cotton Heritage. We're gonna average between about 4.5 to 5. We're gonna play with that setting and practice and make sure that that's a great, the right amount. Okay. On the last one, it was still set at 5, but we did it twice. We did it 2 times. So we used the properly. What's the correct term of saying? I keep losing my place. When you use distilled water with Epsom, what do we call that when we
concentrate?
Concentrate. Thank you.
Right.
That's one of those mornings. So we use the correct concentrate and we use the correct setting, but we just did it 2 times, overemphasizing Terry's earlier point of, well, I thought if you needed really bright prints, I was told you should pre-treat it twice. So we wanted to share with you that could be too much. You could go way too far. So,
well, it's just like if people have if you have an Epson DTG printer, if you can do a double pass of CMYK on that shirt, it's not printing double CMYK. It's printing a little bit of CMYK, and then on top of it's a little bit of CMYK, and all that's doing again is giving you a base of ink that's starting to dry, and then putting another layer of ink on top of that. But it's not a double, it's not twice as much
twice
ink.
The amount, right? Okay,
right. And so it's the same concept.
And in our mistake, we literally had twice the amount. We had 100% too much. So it was like 2 times, same level, too much. And that was that last sample I shared.
And Jay, let me add one more thing. And you have to use a lot of pre-treat for this to happen. But if you have way too much pre-treat on that shirt and it is stiff all the way around, you will likely have washability issues as well, because suddenly you're not printing your ink onto the fabric, you're printing your ink onto a layer of pre-treat. When the pre-treat washes out, so will part of your print. So
Great
again,
point.
that's an extreme amount of pre-treat but it can't happen.
Okay, so let's go back to that earlier question. I forget who asked it. I gave him credit earlier, but what about these conveyor belt dryers? Does that eliminate this problem?
Well, if you use too much pre-treat, you're still going to feel it on the shirt, no matter how you cure it. And I say this to people all the time when they call up and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a conveyor dryer," and I always ask Jay. I always say, "Is it to keep up with production?" And oftentimes they'll say, "Yeah, I have 4 F2100s now, or I have an F3070." But just as often, someone will say, "Well, no, I should have one F2100, but I've got that box around my prints." And so I always take a step back and say, let's try a couple of things first. Hey, would I be happy to sell you a conveyor dryer? Absolutely. But don't buy it as a Band-Aid. You're talking about a $4, $5, $10,000 Band-Aid, when in fact, it might just be an issue of too much pre-treat or too much pressure that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really wise. And you are a very noble, kind sales rep who's going to be honest and have those kinds of questions to find out what the true need of the customer is, rather than just say, yes, this will eliminate that problem, and you should own a dryer. We're big fans of dryers. We're not. We're not saying don't do it. We're just saying, why are you doing this?
Do it for the right reasons. But Jay, and I've spent more time on the other side of this conversation than on the selling equipment side. I ran production shops for years and years and years in screen printing. So I was that guy asking questions about dryers and printers and presses.
No, that's really wise. So obviously you're not going to get the edge, just to restate, but you could still have that starchy feeling, or you could still have some discoloration because the pre-treat's still there. It doesn't go away from heat or from pressure. Correct. Right. It's not until we get it washed where we're going to actually see that dissipate.
Correct. So if you are using too much pre-treat right now and you run that shirt down the dryer belt, you won't see that squared off edge, rectangular edge, but the shirt will still have that feel to it, that texture.
Yeah, I've seen it before, and you can still see a little bit of the pattern because there's a little bit of that. I don't want to call it saltwater glaze or residue. I don't know what it is, but you can see a little filmy pre-treat still, even off that conveyor belt dryer. And definitely you can feel it, which is the one thing we can't do very well on our recordings and on Zoom is to help people touch these and feel these garments. Right.
But we haven't reached that point with the internet yet, but I think Amazon's working on it. Or Skynet, and when that happens,
Skynet, of course. But when that happens, we'll be prepared and ready to do it. So there is a question here, and you may not know the answer to it, and that's okay, but it comes up almost every time because we're in this unique position with the Speed Treater TX. Obviously, we're biased because we love it. We make it, we manufacture it. It is in stock, by the way. But what about those that don't own it? And they seem to be they're measuring the weight, like the grams, like how much of this liquid do I put on this substrate? I don't know those answers. Do you have any vision on that?
Yes and no. Yes, there are some companies that say with 100% cotton shirt, you need this number of grams, and can you go weigh that and weigh the shirt before and weigh the shirt after? And yes, you can do that. Jay, sometimes in my screen printing classes, I have to say to people, it's just a t-shirt. Nobody dies. Everybody calm down a little bit.
We're doing this for fun and profit.
We're just printing t-shirts here. So you can make it, twice as complicated by weight. And I tell you what, our techs will say to you, well, your amount of pre-treat is going to vary depending on the brand of shirt that you're using, by the weight of the fabric. So it's difficult to say, you must use this number of grams of pre-treat on a shirt. So it's really just a matter of testing down to the minimum amount of pre-treat that you can put on that shirt. And so maybe on whatever pre-treat device I have, I say that my setting for a Cotton Heritage dark shirt is going to be 4.5.
Gotcha. Or
It's
32 grams or whatever the amount is.
Right.
But Terry, this, I don't mean to jump in the middle, but we have the same issue. This isn't just unique to SpeedTreat TX customers or others. It's the fact of the matter is that humidity could be a huge difference. So
exactly
the same exact shirt in two different locations could have a different starting weight. So if my shirts here in Arizona were super dry and had very little moisture in them, and then somebody's in Louisiana printing the exact same thing with the same exact setup, but their shirts, it's 85% humidity, and they're like little sponges just sucking up the moisture.
Right.
So there could be some variables that we can't just give you this exact, and this is true, like Roy goes through this all the time. I hear him every day. Well, you're going to have to change that setting or find that happy medium through your own experience, through testing.
Yeah, and you gave the perfect example. We in Phoenix, our average humidity is about 10%. Our good friend Dane Clement, that with Great Dane Graphics, he lives in New Orleans. It's he laughs at 10% humidity. he's 98% humidity. So that's going to impact the amount of pre-treat you're using and your cure times, and every shop, every location is going to be unique in that way.
So we're not trying to find a shortcut here, Terry, but we are trying to set a realistic expectation. We're working backwards from a production ready deliverable product. And in order to do that, we're trying to say, this could be a challenge, this could be a problem, but here are some potential solutions. Correct. And I hope that's what we've delivered here today. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, whether it's setting expectations or how to avoid this DTG box, as we called it? Some call it, we don't, because it depends on what you're printing. It depends on what, there's so many variables. But is there anything else you wanted to add before we roll the credits?
Yes, absolutely. Less is always better. Work backwards on the amount of pre-treat on every different garment that you choose to print. Keep track of it. And if that edge of the heat press is bothersome to you, just buy a steamer, and it'll take you 10 seconds to steam away any little line. And if that makes you feel better about your presentation, then I absolutely recommend you do that.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's what we've got for today. We appreciate those that were here live watching. Thank you so much for all of the comments and questions. Last one, because this actually is something that I wanted to touch on. If you see that in the chat box there, we have somebody who's asked, what about the different kinds of paper? Is that going to make an impact or change that DTG box?
Well, first of all, you don't want to use Teflon because that will hold the moisture in and cause washability issues. In the past, Jay, we had uncoated craft paper and we had coated craft paper. We used uncoated craft paper to dry pre-treat on a heat press. And the reason we did that, because early pre-treats, if you use silicone coated paper, would cause that pre-treat to look basically a shiny box. Not necessary anymore. I don't know of any pre-treats today that you can't use the same craft paper for both. So you want silicone coated craft paper or parchment paper to dry both your pre-treat and to cure your shirts. The reason we use this silicone coated paper to cure the shirts was so the ink wouldn't stick to the paper, but you only need one paper today, and silicone coated parchment paper. The heavier parchment paper, ideally, only for one reason, though, it doesn't impact the drying or the curing, but the heavier paper won't curl up before you get the heat press down. So.
Perfect. Well said. Well, folks, that's all we've got for today. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, we would encourage you to do that. We do have several other sessions earlier that do cover a lot of the pre-treatment specifics with more examples. I know one of them, Roy, went very deep into the do's and the don'ts and how we set up our prints. So we're pretty proud of those. They're designed to give you some help and some a path forward, some answers for sure. So excuse me, there comes that cough. Held it right to the end. But Terry, I want to thank you for being our DTG expert and having been able to give us so many answers. We appreciate that. And so look forward to seeing folks on the other side. Yes, this was recorded, and yes, it will be added to our YouTube channel. That's why I'm sharing this also with you. And then finally, Terry, how can folks get a hold of us? What's the best way for them to reach out? They have more questions, or they're ready
Yeah,
to...
absolutely. We have two offices, one in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, and one in Tempe, Arizona. But you can reach all of us at 800-408-0040 or email us, myself, Amy, or Tim Allen. You see there on your screen our email addresses. Always happy to answer your questions. You're never bothering us with your questions, so feel free. And certainly call our support team anytime you need a little extra help. And all of our support team are DTG printing experts. They focus on DTG, so take advantage of that resource.
Excellent. Appreciate that. And again, I'll close with this. Even if you did not buy your F2100 or F3070 from us and you're struggling, this came up on our Facebook group just yesterday. Still, you can reach out to us, give us a call, or start a support ticket. If we have the answer, we want to help you out. We want to see your business grow. That's why we do this. That's why we give back. We don't know that we have all the answers, but we're pretty sure we have most of the answers, as was evidenced by Terry's excellent work today. So yeah, give us a call or start a tech ticket. Go to our website and you can see tech support, and we'll be happy to help. So that's all I've got. I'm glad I was able to do this. Thank you so much again, Terry, for all of those who participated. We're glad you were here, and we'll see you on the other side on another webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.